Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. Today we have got one heck of a show for you because there's all sorts of madness. Christmas is not far away, and the madness of Christmas, where things are costing an absolute and utter fortune, and people are getting less and less and less for their money. We're going to get into that, and your decorations as well in your local high street. I think they've started scrimping and saving on that. Plus, we'll be touching on the super flu epidemic, which apparently we're being told is closing schools up and down the country and forcing hospitals to take in 3 times as many patients as they've seen since the COVID days. For heaven's sake, don't take us back to the mask wearing. And then we're going to be talking to Jamie Jenkins about that. Plus, that climate change summit, which did absolutely nothing. In fact, all it did was push emissions up rather than down. And of course, I'll be asking the question, are we living in some kind of weird parallel universe where every single time you get on a train, you get an announcement every 15 seconds telling you what to do? It's madness. I've had enough. Don't forget, you're watching YouTube, so please like it and subscribe to the channel. Now, you know, I often talk about how much I enjoy driving around in my rather nice car, which I do, but from time to time, I have to take the train. And of late, particularly in the last couple of weeks, I've had to take a train out of Waterloo Station, which is supposedly one of the busiest stations in Britain. I think it might even be the busiest station in Britain. But as I was sitting down this morning waiting to get on my train, 'cause I was a bit early, had a cup of coffee, and I was reading all these signs about how service is going to be interrupted over Christmas, right? And obviously there's no service, I think, on Christmas Day. There's no service on Boxing Day. There's no service on the 27th or the 28th. And this whole list and litany of what's going wrong is because they're fixing the track, apparently, between Waterloo and Clapham, which is about, 20 yards away. And there's going to be severe disruption. But that's not what I'm talking about this morning. What I want to talk about is the ludicrous nature of the warnings that you hear and the announcements that you hear all the time. Because I don't know what world people think we are living in now. But it starts when you come out of the underground at Waterloo, and as you go up the escalator to get into the main sort of railway station part of the station, there's a voice that says, "Escalators are moving machinery. Please take care when you are using them." You can see that it's moving. Sometimes it's not moving, because sometimes they're broken, and you have to walk up. But you know that it's a piece of moving machinery. I don't know who they think they're dealing with. They put these brushes on the side now so you don't trap your foot underneath the rubber. Are people really that stupid? I can't believe it. Anyway, then you get on the train, right? And the first notice that you get told about is the one that says that various cards will not be valid on this particular journey. Like if you've got an Oyster card, which is what people have to travel around in London, it's like a contactless kind of travel card. Or if you've got a travel card that you've bought, you can't use any of that. No, absolutely not. And then it says, "Please treat our teams with kindness." All right? And they then describe how and what will happen to you if you don't treat them with kindness, because some people get quite irate on trains, and there's a good reason for it. Sometimes it's because some of the other individuals on trains are not exactly well behaved, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. I've got a friend who once had a bit of an altercation on a train with a carriage, and you'll know what this is like, right? You get on the train, pretty empty carriage, hardly anybody there, and then the person either comes and sits next to you, or in the sort of 4 seats opposite you, or behind you in this case, right? And my friend, who doesn't have a particularly good temper when things go a bit wrong, noticed that this guy was munching on a packet of crisps, right? And there's something about people that eat on trains. I don't like it. I just don't think it's a place to eat. On the underground, it's even worse. You see people like digging into a bowl of coleslaw or something on the underground train. It's like, what are you thinking? Eat it on a park bench or something. When do you get home? Anyway, this guy behind my friend was munching away into his packet of crisps, and the smell from the packet of crisps was emanating throughout. And so my friend sort of got up on the seat and kneeled on the seat and poked his head over the back of the seat and said to this guy, "Excuse me, do you mind not eating that packet of crisps right behind me? The whole train is empty. Why don't you go and sit somewhere else?" And the guy clearly wasn't impressed with this and basically just continued to eat and ignored him. So my friend grabbed the packet of crisps out of his hand and chucked him out the window, which I thought was brilliant. And the guy was so shocked, I don't think he didn't know what to do, really. I think he got up and just disappeared and was never seen again. But anyway, so back to the journey, right? So once you're told to treat the teams with kindness, they then go into a long diatribe about how there are both uniformed and plainclothes revenue protection teams on the train. And if you don't have the right ticket, you may face a fine of a minimum £100, or you may face prosecution. They are also wearing body cameras so that they can make sure that you don't misbehave. And of course, if you do misbehave, you may well be reported to the British Transport Police and arrested. But please be kind. And you just think, what is this? What is this all about? We're constantly watching you. We want to make sure that you don't step out of line. You're not allowed to do anything that we don't like. I mean, I got one of these revenue protection officers, i.e. the guard, who came to check my ticket. And he asked me if the final destination on my ticket was my final destination. And I went, well, yeah. Well, it's a stupid question, isn't it? Well, I bought a ticket to go to a place. Why would I go somewhere else? It was almost as though, I was pretending that I was going to get off at this particular station because it wasn't very far, and I was going to try and bunk the rest of the way. I mean, I might have done that when I was a schoolboy. I'm not going to do it now. It's just mad. And these bloody announcements, they just don't stop. And about every sort of 35 or 60 seconds, there's another one. It's insane. I don't know what's going on with this country, but it needs to stop. They need to stop telling us things. It all started during COVID. Remember when they used to tell you to walk this way, stand here, don't go there, pay attention, don't be too close to people near, that's when it started. And it hasn't stopped. And it needs to stop. And it needs to stop now. So you might remember a few weeks ago, everyone was very excited about the climate summit. Remember that? The one in Brazil. That's right. The one where they completely destroyed the Amazon rainforest so that they could lay a massive road so that they could take a lot of VIPs, world leaders, and assorted kind of doom bloggers and people who absolutely think the world is coming to an end if we don't all stop driving around in cars and flying around in planes. But they all flew in, as they do. It was COP30 in Brazil. That was the one where Starmer went out and nearly tripped over and fell on his face, remember? Because he couldn't put one foot in front of the other. I mean, what an absolute plonker that man is. But believe it or not, despite the fact that this is COP30, the only thing that you ever know that's going to happen at these meetings is that they're going to plan where the next one is, right? So this is the 30th year in a row they've been doing this, right? And it may not come as any great surprise to you, but global emissions are actually up. They're not down, right? They haven't gone anywhere other than up. So what's the bleeding point, I suppose, is the question. We're going to be joined now by our favourite statistician, the official statistician of the Mike Graham Show, Mr. Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yeah, everything's going up, apart from the money that the government's trying to get in off.
And the money in your pocket. I mean, they used to call it the pound in your pocket, didn't they? And the pound in your pocket now. I mean, we're going to talk about this this week, but some of the cost of things now is so ridiculous. You suddenly go. I mean, I went and got a coffee and a croissant the other morning. It was £7. And you're thinking, sorry, it can't be costing you more than about £2 to make. How is it £7?
Whenever I go horse racing, I take my dad to the horse racing now and again, and I was thinking, like £3 or £4 for a cup of tea. You can probably get about 4,000 tea bags for the same price, I think, Mike. It's absolutely ridiculous, the price at the moment.
I know. And then they'll say, oh, well, it's down to global warming or it's down to climate change that everything's gone up in price. It actually isn't anything to do with climate change. It's the fact that most of these manufacturers are now getting so greedy that they just think, we can just charge them £2 instead of £1. They'll pay it, But let's talk about these figures, though, from this climate conference, because this was supposed to be, the big one, wasn't it? This was supposed to be the one where they'd reinstate the Paris Accords. This was going to be the one where all the countries were going to come together. The world leaders were going to come up with a plan to safeguard the globe. But instead, it turns out the emissions are actually up.
Yeah, so if we go back, I think 1995 was the first COP, Mike. So they've been having 30 years of this. I call it a big climate jolly because you touched on it in the intro there. So 13 kilometers of road, and they had to build it. But it's kind of the fact that they had to cut the rainforest down, cut these trees down, which soak up the CO2 in the first place. It's like somebody thought this is an absolute nut job in terms of doing this thing. But actually damaging the rainforest.
Yeah. And also, they're all flying in on various different private jets. And, I think there's never been more private jets than the one they went to in Dubai. There were literally, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. Half the world's jets were at this bleeding conference. And you've written about this on your Substack. Tell people where they can find that, by the way.
Yeah, so if anybody over to statsjamie.co.uk, Mike, everything we talk about on the show, they'll all be appearing up there. Plenty of clips from me and you as well on there. So head over to statsjamie.co.uk, free for everybody. But what we've had, Mike, 95 to 2000 and where we are 2012 today, global emissions are up 60%. And I don't think Donald Trump even bothered attending this one,
No.
Mike. So all these leaders are flying in. Donald Trump's seen kind of the light in terms of the back end of this, and it's not just those delegates who fly in once. I think people were flying in because it's not a couple of days. These conferences, Mike, they go on for weeks.
Yeah.
So they fly in, come home for the weekend, go back again. So I think there's over 50,000 delegates talk about the climate. Now, what do you need 50,000 people to do? And you think.
Right.
Where do you fit 50,000 people as well? You may as well have the climate summit at Wembley Stadium or something and just stick them all in there.
Well, it's insane, isn't it? It's just totally insane because they never actually decide to do anything worthwhile. I mean, we've just found out from this government, haven't we, that, you'll basically have no advantage any longer if you drive an electric car because, in fact, you're going to be paying effectively road tax, whether it's pay per mile, even though they don't know how they're going to work that out, or whether they're going to start charging you to go into the congestion zones in London and in Glasgow and in Newcastle and all these places where supposedly you were getting exemptions, So it's no longer any use to have an electric car. So they've obviously worked out that that's not making any difference. And why, though, are the emissions actually up? I mean, what's actually changed that's put the emissions up? Because according to what you've said, emissions are up 60%. And household bills for energy are going through the roof.
Yes, so the emissions are going up, Mike, because countries like China, India, Pakistan, they're just increasing the emissions, building more coal-fired power stations. And people say when I talk about this, oh, well, China are leading the race on renewables. Yeah, they're leading the race on renewables. They're building a load of renewable stuff to sell to us. And what we've been doing, Mike, is, okay, we've been cutting our emissions, but take the steel industry. So we've got a big steel plant here in South Wales. Loads of jobs have been lost there because our government says, oh, we can't have the emissions in the UK figures on all of this. So what we've done, Mike, over the last 30 years, Europe in particular, not just the UK, is we pretty much outsourced our emissions. So what we do is we don't get the steel from, say, South Wales or other parts of the UK as much as we used to, but we still need steel. So what we then do, we basically go over to India and then we say, oh, can we buy your steel off you, or China? Can we buy it off other countries? We're still... Basically, the emissions are still going up because it's a global problem. If clutter is a problem, there's a big debate of if it's a problem or not. But it's a global thing in terms of the CO2 emissions. So they basically create all the emissions over there. They send them back over here. So our manufacturing has been decimated. Mike, what does it mean for us? It means fewer jobs. That's why the old industrial heartlands of the UK are struggling, because we've outsourced so much of this stuff. Yeah. And then we basically outsource the emissions, outsource the jobs, then we buy everything back in. But when you buy the stuff back in, the money leaves the UK, so it makes us poorer. Yeah. And then on top of that, we've got the nonsense where we import gas from the North Sea, from Norway, but we don't get the North Sea gas ourselves because of the ideology of Ed Miliband. So
and it's literally the gas that we're getting from Norway is literally being taken out of the seabed right next to where the fields are that we used to open and used to run and used to own.
Yeah, and that's the mental stuff about it. So we've got some of the highest energy costs, especially on kind of when you're talking about businesses in terms of the business costs for them. So part of this whole kind of global warming conversations around net zero, and we just briefly talked about why is coffee so much higher. In the UK, we're so uncompetitive in terms of our businesses that everything goes up. When energy prices go up, everything goes up because everything generally involves some form of energy. So if we want to get the inflation down, which is good for the economy and good for people who are poorer, get the numbers down, get energy costs down. So importing this stuff, we should be utilizing our own natural resources. And why are we importing loads of stuff that's being produced abroad, where all the emissions are abroad? Produce it in the UK. Let's have jobs in the UK. More tax in the UK. This government, Mike, is just basically outsourcing everything. We'll have nothing left. You'll probably, within about the next couple of years, Mike, instead of being sat where you are now, you'll have to be sat in Thailand doing your show because you won't be able to afford with a camera on. That's what it's going to be like.
It'd probably be a lot cheaper as well, yeah. They'll have forced loads more, hundreds of thousands of people out of here by then. But do you remember, you talked about the steel plant down in South Wales. Do you remember old Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor? He was put in charge of British Steel. Do you remember when he was the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, right? Despite the fact that he's never run a business in his life, despite the fact that he spent 10 years lying about being a solicitor when he wasn't. I don't know if he's still in charge of British Steel, but if he's not, who is?
Well, Mike, how many people in the cabinet have been in charge of, the kind of the areas? Is David Lammy? Does he know anything about the prison service? Does Rachel Reeves know anything about the economy?
No.
Of course they don't, Mike. And the biggest mental stuff I find with politics is, you start a new job and it'll take you a bit of time. So I've always thought, whenever I start a job, Mike, you say 6 months to learn it, then you can start having an impact. But the time these cabinet ministers actually understand, the environment department or the justice department, they then get reshuffled somewhere else just before they're about to be able to do something. Absolutely mental in terms of how we've managed the politics in this country.
I know, it really is. Let's talk about something else, though, that's hit the news today, and that's this super flu sweeping Britain. Apparently, according to various different pieces of statistics that I've seen, there's a mutant super flu which is shutting down schools, and certainly in parts of the UK, including London, hospitalisations have tripled. So there's a lot of people getting sick. But it slightly worries me when you start to see like government health warnings going out, particularly when they say you should wear a mask, because obviously this is going to be a bit like COVID, and we all know where that ended up. This week's another week where we're hearing about incredible kind of conflicts of interest with all the people who are running SAGE, which we're going to talk about this week as well. Just incredible mismanagement of public health, incredible kind of misdirection by government ministers, outright lies, telling you to do things that they knew wouldn't make any difference. I mean, it's just insane. We can't let them do this again, can we? The flu.
No, and once you bring up the flu, Mike, a few people I bump into in the street, they always say, because I think they saw me for the first time on with you back in the day talking about what was going on during the pandemic, and many people said that you and Mike got me through the pandemic. So if people are still watching and still going, so that is really important that we keep the facts and keep the alarmatism out of all of this. So one of my family members is in hospital at the moment, Mike. So I've been back and forth to hospital quite a bit, and they've introduced these mask mandates back in hospital. And I speak to some of the staff, and it's okay. Maybe one thing we do know is the spores of some of these things when you're coughing. They get through some of the masks that they're giving you. We're not wearing helmets when we go to hospital. We're wearing those paper kind of masks that are going on. But some of the staff, they have to wear them pretty much on a 12-hour shift. You have to wear them for 12 hours. And some of the staff tell me, it makes them feel really ill, and they probably get some exemptions.
Well, do you remember Peter Hitchens? He used to come in to the office where I was working, and he'd wear, and into his own office as well at Daily Mail, wearing a World War I gas mask, right? And when they said, "What are you doing?" he just went, "Well, I said I was told to wear a mask, so I'm wearing this one." They absolutely hated it, but he was right. But I mean, I'm looking at a story here in which it talks about a school in Wales, actually in Caerphilly, a place called St Martin's, where they've had a temporary closure, right? Because they say 250 pupils and staff fell ill. That doesn't sound right to me. There's no way 250 pupils and staff have fallen ill. And they basically said the school closed last Friday. It's aiming to reopen sometime this week, right? But parents have been urged to keep their children at home if they show any symptoms, even if they're mild. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah, we're pretty much getting into kind of a local lockdowns there, Mike, aren't we? And remember the whole mask thing as well, where when you were in restaurants back in the day, where they were mandatory, these things. Well, I've just been talking about perhaps in a hospital setting, which is a bit more focused in terms of where they are. But remember, we had these mask mandates. I think Nicola Sturgeon was caught not wearing one. They were telling us what to do. They weren't doing themselves. But it was great, the COVID virus, Mike, because you would go into a bar or a restaurant, and you would go to the bar and you're standing around the bar, you'd have to have your mask on to make your order or go to the toilet, and then you could go and sit about 5 yards to the left, sit down for 2 hours without the mask on, because that COVID virus, Mike, it was so clever, it would go nowhere near you when you were eating food, but as soon as you were at the bar, it'd start attacking you.
Right.
The absolute nonsense. And I was watching a clip the other day on my X profile there, just because I was trying to remind myself what was going on. And then Jonathan Van Tam, he was one of the advisors back in the day. He wasn't a massive fan of masks. He was asked on some Radio 4 show, I think, about, do you still wear a mask? And he said, no, I don't wear a mask. So, these mandates, people think, well, it's not very hard to put a mask on. But, go both back to those nurses, Mike.
Ridiculous.
Wear them for 12 hours a day. And, my children are in school. Are they going to say you're going to start wearing masks in school because our school's going down with the flu? Yeah. The one thing you can be quite sure of, Mike, is a bit like deaths and taxes. You're not going to be taxed and you're all going to die. You can guarantee around November, December time, You Google now, Mike, any article, the Guardian's bad for this, but you Google last 30 years, you can guarantee the Guardian or somebody has basically said the NHS is going to crumble this winter.
Yeah.
It's not going to survive. But we always come back out in March with basically, and we're all still pretty much here.
Yeah. Well, this is the question I always have for any government health minister, if they would ever come on the show and talk to me, is I'd say, why is it that every kind of October, November time we get the headline, as you say, either in the Guardian or the Mirror, saying, it's literally 24 hours to save the NHS. I think those were actually Ed Miliband's words once. And it's the same every year, and yet they never do anything. They never change anything. So when they're supposedly not in crisis through January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, they haven't changed the system at all so that it's always in crisis when they get to October. It's completely mad. It's like the thing's being run by insanity and by people from some kind of lunatic asylum. I mean, I remember, we used to drink in a pub near London Bridge and the guy was pretty relaxed about it. And I'm like, how is it that you can have 10 tables of 6 people, but you can't have 6 tables of 10 people? It's in the same room. What difference does it make? And that was one of the rules that we all had to do. I remember being out for a drink with Nigel Farage and a bunch of people once. It's about 10 of us in a bar in Whitehall. And then we were on sort of 3 different tables, and he kept getting up and coming and talking to one table and to another. And this guy came from behind the bar and said he had to sit down. And he was like, he wasn't taking that. He was just like, I'm sorry, this is a pub. It's a public house. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to talk to people. And in the end, we just left because it was like, this is ridiculous. You come into a pub, you should be able to do whatever you want, within the law. And this was the problem. Nobody knew what the law was. I remember talking to Chris Philp once when he was the Justice Minister, I think, in the Tory government. And I said to him, what's the deal with wearing a mask on the underground? Because I'm not sure. I keep seeing police officers and they keep telling me to put a mask on. And I keep saying to them, I'm not going to put a mask on until I get on the train. And if I need to put it on, I'll put it on the train. And they were like, well, no, you should always wear it. And I said to Chris Philp, I said, what's the actual legal position? And you know what he said? He said, well, you should wear a mask. And I said, why? He said, because it's the right thing to do. And I just went, sorry? That's not the law. The law doesn't work like that. And I said, how is it the right thing to do? What difference does it make? And everybody knows now, and all the results have come out of all these studies, that wearing a mask, particularly the kind of mask that people were wearing, is in fact probably more dangerous in terms of you getting the virus than not.
Yeah, and Mike...
And we said this all along. It's not another... by the way, if you're watching this show now and you think, oh, yeah, Mike's saying all this now because he's independent. Yeah, I was saying it all then, as you were.
Yeah, and maybe we should... I'll dig out in some of the archives. I got about old interviews, Mike. I'll have to watch a few back. We'll have to have a bit of a nostalgia show, perhaps, in a couple of weeks.
Maybe we should do that, yeah.
I'll pick some stuff up. But ultimately, Mike, when we talk about why this is all important, it is pretty much because it should be all evidence and factual based. And you're right, the thing for me, and where you talked about the NHS is going to struggle over the winter, the big thing that's coming down the line, Mike, for people, the number of people over 75. So when you visit hospitals, you will tend to see that there's people of all ages in there in the A&E department, but in the wards, there's generally elderly people there. The number of people over 70, and this isn't hard to predict, Mike, because, you can see the bulge of people in the population. The number of people over 75 is going to go up quite a lot over the next 15 years. And I look in my local area here, we've had the same one hospital near where I live for so long that it can't cope, Mike. It used to be where you'd go to the A&E department and they'd try and find you a little cubicle. When I visit there now, you've got people sat in corridors with drips coming down through them. Getting a bed in A&E is like getting a kind of a place, a hotel at the moment. So This is coming down the line, Mike. The NHS is in a complete mess. And going back to this mask mandate, I'm thinking of the staff here. If staff want to wear them, great. If they don't want to wear them, don't do it. That's the important thing here, Mike. And you're right, we were talking about this years ago. Some people are jumping on the bandwagon, but the narrative has definitely shifted. I think the public won't be doing anything like a COVID lockdown ever again.
Yeah, I think that's right. Jamie, great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins there reporting into us from South Wales there, where he is our official statistician for the Mike Graham Show. Don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, like it, please, and subscribe to it, because that's where we need to go. We need to take these numbers even higher than they are. And I want to thank you all for subscribing so far and getting us so far up the ladder. There's also my Substack, of course, which is themikegrahamshow.com, and you can find us all there. We'll keep investigating the NHS. We'll keep taking your stories, so do keep sending them in to us right here. I'm Mike Graham. So we've been talking there about the flu outbreak. Super flu is what we're being told is currently, plaguing the NHS. And if you've got stories about that, obviously, you should let us know. Particularly if you've been to a hospital recently, and tell us what's going on vis-a-vis what masks are being worn. We've been asking you this week as well for your stories and your opinions on how you use the NHS and how it works. And I have to say, some of the stories that we've had so far have been extraordinary. But you can keep sending them to us on X. You can post them as well on the live feed, of course, as well on the YouTube, and you can message us on the Substack as well, and we'll pick them all up as we go. So I'm just going to read some more today. Absolutely extraordinary, some of the messages that I've been getting. But Baldy says this to me. He says, "Are you going to report any positive stories or just the bad experiences because that fits your agenda?" Listen, it doesn't fit anybody's agenda to have a National Health Service that doesn't work very well. And everybody knows it doesn't work very well. Even the Labour government have accepted that it doesn't work very well. You know, we've all got different opinions as to why it doesn't work very well. They think it's all the fault of the Tories. I think it's all the fault of the actual people that run the NHS. But if there are positive stories, by all means send them in. But we're not getting very many, I have to say. Nothing to do with an agenda. It has everything to do with the way that the service is run. And this is from Leo. Get rid of the pen pushers, get matrons back on the wards. A lot of people say that. Farah says this: it is a grossly wasteful, bloated, bottomless pit that is in dire need of reform and a forensic review of how the billions are spent. I've had lots of you giving me examples, actually, of how much money is wasted in the NHS, because when you work in it, you can see that. I've spoken to nurses and I've spoken to doctors who say the same, that, you know, you can open a cupboard on any corridor, on any floor of any NHS hospital, and you can find loads of stuff in there that they've ordered, but which is just sitting there, not being used. Whether it's medical equipment, whether it's medicine, whether it's things that they paid ridiculous amounts of money for. My other half, says Fran, had cancer and had chemo for 5 months. Thankfully, it's okay. However, when contemplating dental surgery, he was asked to provide the surgeon with his drug regime. He asked and expected the results reasonably quickly. He got 6 months before he had an email from people to say what was going on. And this actually is something that Fraser Nelson wrote about. He's a Times columnist, so you might consider him to be somebody who would get his facts right. Half of trainee British doctors finishing this summer have no job lined up. Yet the NHS is poaching foreign doctors. 1 in 6 of Nigeria's doctors are now working in the UK. The real scandal isn't pay, it's a broken training pipeline. I think that's right. Absolutely. And Grassy says you need to ask how many millions in medical negligence claims they're sitting on. Exactly right. And speaking of sitting on, I've got one here from Richard, who says, my doctor gave me a course of suppositories. Sorry, this is not a funny subject, but this is. My doctor gave me a course of suppositories, but for all the good they did, I might sort of shove them up my backside. Yeah, that's what you were supposed to have done with them, Richard. I wonder if that's Richard III. Oh, sorry, it's Rachel. Sorry, Rachel sent that in. Thank you, Rachel.
I know what it takes to run a successful economy. I believe in sound money and in public spending that's kept under control.
It's a very horrible image I've now got in my head. Now, this is a slightly longer one from the Festive Prince. This is on Twitter. Good morning, Mike. I booked yesterday off work as I had a hospital appointment and needed to go to the doctors for an ongoing issue. I was prescribed Wegovy for weight loss and had my 2-year review. My appointment was at 10 o'clock, so I arrived 10 minutes early. The waiting room was full, but that's common. I was still waiting at 10:25, so I went and was told that I wasn't close to being seen. They said they would keep my place online or in line, so I went to the doctors. I came back and waited for about another 15 minutes. It was now about 11:20, and I finally saw the consultant. It was then that I was told, quite matter-of-factly, that I had been diabetic for the last 2 years. I hadn't been diagnosed with diabetes before. The consultant then said that the reason I had only lost 10% of my weight is that the drug I was on wasn't really suitable, and that's why my weight loss was smaller than expected, right? And so in the last 2 years, I've had blood tests every 3 months, which supposedly checked for diabetes, amongst other things. And it's only when the consultant sat down and looked at my results after 2 years that I was diagnosed. They said, luckily, I'm very borderline, so probably wouldn't have needed any additional medication for the last 2 years. Then they carried on with the rest of the consultation. When they finished, they told me to go for another blood test. I then asked what would happen now. I'm classed as diabetic as the consultant was ready for me to leave, as I was quite shocked and overwhelmed as I wasn't expecting to be told that. They then said they would write to my surgery, so I would have to go for an eye test and see a doctor to discuss. If I hadn't have asked this, then I would have left without knowing any of this. I then went to get my blood tested, and as I was walking up there, I had to wait another 1.5 hours to get it done. It was a bloody good job I booked a whole day off. I can't believe, well, actually I can, because the World Health Service is not fit for purpose, that I've been diabetic for 2 years without knowing, despite being seen every 3 months and having regular blood testing for diabetes, only to find out quite dismissively and nonchalantly without really being explained to. Absolutely incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. People have got so many stories to tell. This one from Excalibur. How about when you suffer a 3-column fracture across your L1 vertebrae and 999 tell you to call 111, who tell you to go and get some painkillers? He says, 4 days at home, held together by the ligaments, calling my GP on the following Monday, secured an ambulance, the surgery, and a 5-week hospital stay. What does it take to get an ambulance these days? Do you have to be stabbed? Do you have to be shot? And finally, this one from Luke. Please, 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 can you talk about the insanity of allowing GP receptionists to make decisions about whether or not the person calling them up needs to see a doctor, or the insanity of allowing them to read follow-up letters from consultants and organise the next action? Care for my rare vascular malformation was delayed for months because GP reception decided that all I needed to do was to go to a pharmacy for stockings for my legs, despite my referral letter asking that I be fitted for surgical compression for my arm. I've also been told I didn't need to see a doctor, despite being prescribed medication that meant the current pain relief I was using was no longer safe. These people have zero clinical experience, yet they're empowered by the GP to make clinical decisions. I mean, it sounds horrendous, doesn't it? It's pure insanity, says Luke. Yet every GP surgery in the country seems to allow this to be the status quo. These people often revel in the power that they have, despite rarely even having a biology GCSE. Well, I always tell the story of during COVID, when we used to get an awful lot of people ringing us and sending us pictures and letting us know what their experiences were of the health service, which basically became the national COVID service. And my favourite image and my favourite, I think, story came from somewhere like Rugby. And I've mentioned this many times before on the air, where one of our listeners sent me a picture of a sign that was on the outside of the GP surgery, right, in which the sign said, "Please do not enter if you are ill." Right? Doctor's surgery in the middle of supposedly a pandemic. You're not supposed to go to the doctor if you're ill. What are you supposed to do? Go to the doctor if you're all right. I've come to see you, doctor. Why? Nothing wrong with me. Right. Well, you can go now. It's just madness, isn't it? Complete and utter madness. Keep bringing your stories to us, and we'll keep bringing your stories to everybody else. You can send them to us, as I said, on X. You can send them to us via the YouTube feed, which is Mike Graham Show. And you can also, if you're a member of our Substack, which is very much worth looking at, because there's all sorts of great stuff there, articles, exclusive content that you won't get anywhere else. And that is, of course, the MikeGrahamShow.com. So Christmas, right? Just a couple of weeks away now. So probably you've done most of your Christmas shopping, if you've got any money, that is, to spend. You've probably worked out what you're going to have for Christmas Day, whether it's turkey, whether it's chicken, whether it's beef, whether it's lamb. We've been having this conversation in my house because everybody wants something different. So who knows how it's all going to end up. But there's a couple of stories I want to tell you about, and I want to ask you about as well, because I want to get your input, because that's what this show is all about, right? We want your kind of involvement in everything that we do. So I'm going to ask you to send me your sort of stories, your pictures of what Christmas is for you, whether it's in your town, whether it's in your city, whether you're celebrating it differently, whether the trees that are around are a bit smaller. Because I've got a story for you from Battle down in Sussex, little town, not where they had the Battle of Richard III's time, of course. That was in 1485, the Battle of Bosworth Field. We talk about Richard III a lot, obviously, because his face keeps coming up every time I think of Rachel Reeves.
I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
He'd probably be better at running the economy, actually. But 1485 keeps coming up as well. I don't know why. When I went to pay for something the other day, it was 1485, and I went, how is this happening? It's very weird. Anyway, never mind, nothing about Rachel Reeves, but the Battle, of course, town that I'm talking about is where they had the Battle of Hastings, supposedly, even though they've never ever found any artifacts from the battlefield, right? So nobody's really that sure exactly where the battle took place, but it definitely did take place there. But as I always say, why isn't it called the Battle of Battle then? Why is it called the Battle of Hastings? And I also always say how fortunate it was for the Normans, because when they came over, they landed in a place called Norman's Bay. I mean, who could have guessed that that's what the coincidence would have happened, And people go, don't be an idiot. It wasn't called Norman's Bay before they landed in it. Well, all right. Anyway, listen, Christmas in Battle is usually quite nice. They've usually got a lovely big tree. This year, the tree is like something out of The Hobbit, because apparently they haven't got any money, right? They also haven't got any lights, because normally they've got some quite pretty lights that go across the high street. And they've got little poles that come out that have got illuminations on them and little mini Christmas trees. And it's really a nice kind of thing. And they would close off the street in the first sort of Saturday in December. Father Christmas would come, kids would come out, and they'd switch the lights on, you know. And it was always a lovely occasion. One of the nicest parts of Sussex for that sort of thing to happen. But this year, apparently the councillors got it all wrong because they'd forgotten, or nobody told them, that last year there was a problem with the lights. When they took the lights down, some health and safety maniac from some electrical company said that they were dangerous and they couldn't put them back up. And they'd completely forgotten this until apparently late October, by which time it was too late to fix the problem. So they decided they didn't have any money to do anything else. So they had to crowdfund for 10,000 quid so that they could get some fairy lights, which they've kind of draped across the shops. But instead of going, you know, over this high street like it's meant to, like a sort of a canopy, they're just literally white lights going up and down one side of the street and the other side of the street. So it's not very nice. It's not very good. So the locals are not very happy about it. And it's a typical kind of story of the uselessness of our local councils, you know, because you can't even vote these people out because the Labour government have cancelled the election. They're not even going to have an election this year. They didn't have one last year. They're not going to have one next year. And we're talking about 2028, if you're lucky, before you can dislodge any of these characters. Absolutely mad. But meanwhile, I thought we'd have a look at how ridiculously expensive some things have become, because you'll have seen in recent times we had the £200 beef Wellington, which I think was in Marks and Spencer's. There was one from Fortnum and Mason's. I mean, there's an awful lot of people charging an awful lot of money. 180 quid, I think Tom Kerridge's one costs. You know, he's one of those famous, celebrity chefs. He's got a couple of restaurants around the country. But how about this, right? The most expensive toastie has been found, and this has been found by one of the newspapers, right? The Christmas sandwich, which people used to sort of be able to get it in places like Pret, you know, where it would be a bit of turkey, a bit of cranberry sauce, you know, a bit of stuffing, all in a kind of a toasted sandwich. And that was bad enough because they started this kind of trend of selling you a salad for like 13 quid. You know, I was talking the other day about how a coffee and a croissant cost me $6.99. Well, check this out, right? Harrods has got a steakhouse called The Grill on Fifth, and they've got a sandwich consisting of a burger patty, a roast turkey breast, a bit of stuffing, a pig in a blanket, spiced red cabbage, cranberry sauce, and turkey gravy. Sounds horrendous. This just sounds like a heart attack on a plate, doesn't it? But guess how much they want for it? 29 quid for a sandwich, right? Richard Corrigan is another guy who's got a place called Daffodil Mulligan, an Irish restaurant in Hackney. He's got a Kelly Bronze turkey and sugar pit pork sandwich, and he's also put beetroot in it and cranberry sauce. And that one will set you back about another 20 quid. There's a place in Clerkenwell, which is another trendy part of London, the Crown Tavern. They've got a towering feast of turkey, bacon, melted camembert, chestnut stuffing and braised red cabbage drenched in red wine gravy and served with fries or a salad for 12 quid. And the Fat Badger, which is apparently a place in Notting Hill where David Cameron likes to go, £14 will get you a semolina crusted sub roll filled with roast turkey, rendered pancetta, sage and onion stuffing, Brussels sprout slaw, old Winchester cheese and spiced green tomato chutney. It's mad, isn't it? You can't just get ordinary pork anymore. It's got to have something in front of it. Or, you know, you can't just have ham. You have to have pancetta. You can't just have mustard. It has to be a savoury cranberry mustard. You can't just have a pig in blanket. It has to be something else. A Christmas burger at Fowl in St James's costs 18 quid. I mean, who's affording all this stuff, right? A pub in Highgate, North London, 22 quid for a side of roast potatoes. 22 quid. I mean, it's just mad, isn't it? So much money being wasted by people who have obviously got more money than sense. Tomato chili jam. How about cranberry cream cheese? You can get a Bengali mustard sauce with one thing in an Indian restaurant, Dishoom's, right? They'll give you a Bengali mustard sauce sprinkled with spices, wrapped in a freshly baked naan with 2 fried eggs, cranberry cream cheese, tomato chili jam, and coriander leaves. I mean, I'm sure it tastes very nice. But it's all a bit much, isn't it? I mean, after a while, you get to Christmas Day and you're not even hungry. Last year, I took my daughter to a hotel And we got up in the morning, slightly hungover on Christmas Day, and had a full English breakfast at about 9:30. Then went for a swim, and then realised that our Christmas dinner was at 12:30, and we weren't even hungry. But we managed to sort of pick our way through it. But, you know, Christmas, I need your stories. So do get in touch. Do tell us what they are. And also, when you're watching the YouTube feed, which is live every morning at 7 a.m, Monday to Friday, plus extra special things that are coming out all the time on our Substack as well, where you get ad-free content and you get exclusive post-show content. Do like it. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. And if you want to get a subscription to the Substack, that would be brilliant as well, because this is where it's all happening. It's the Mike Graham Show. Fastest growing show, I think, of all time. Do you feel like we're living in some kind of parallel universe or something? Because nothing seems to work. It's a bit like that movie Falling Down. You know, Michael Douglas gets so fed up with the traffic jam that he can't get through, with people that won't help him, with people who are just difficult all the bleeding time. And he just decides he needs to start rebelling against it. I think I've had enough of it.